I came home from a classified military mission expecting to see my wife waiting at the airport with that smile I'd been dreaming about for 6 months. Instead, my canine partner, the most disciplined military dog I've ever worked with, lost his mind over a random suitcase on the baggage carousel. He barked like he'd detected an active bomb. His paws scratched at the ground. His eyes locked on that suitcase with pure terror. I ignored him at first. Max never barked without reason. But then I opened it. Inside was blood. Inside was my wife's wedding ring. Inside was evidence that the woman I loved was dead, or worse. And I had no idea where she was or who put her there. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The airport terminal smelled like expensive cologne and recycled air. I'd walked through this same corridor 100 times in my military career, but this time felt different. Everything felt different because I wasn't a black ops soldier anymore. Not for the next 2 weeks. For 14 days, I was just Mason. Just a husband coming home. My phone buzzed. A text from Eliza. Running late from work, babe. Meet you at arrivals? Love you. I smiled and texted back. See you in 15. She tried to pick me up from the base many times, but I always told her no. Operational security. She never understood why I couldn't let her near the base, why I had to drive myself to the airport instead. She just accepted it. That was Eliza. She accepted things. She trusted me completely. Or at least, I thought she did. The baggage carousel hummed to life. Travelers crowded around, elbows sharp, impatience thick in the air. I stood back like I always did, old habit from combat zones. Never get trapped in a crowd. Always keep sight lines clear. Always know where the exits are. That's when Max started acting strange. Max wasn't technically my dog. He was military property, a 5-year-old German Shepherd trained for bomb detection and patrol work. We'd been deployed together to 3 different countries. He'd saved my life twice. Once by alerting on an IED buried under rubble. Once by hearing insurgents moving in darkness I couldn't see. Max and I had a bond that went deeper than owner and pet. We understood each other without words. But Max had never disobeyed me. Not once. He was walking beside me on his lead, calm and controlled like he was trained to be. Then a specific suitcase came around the carousel, a black hardshell number, standard issue, the kind you see 10 times a day at any airport. Max's entire body went rigid. Max, I said quietly. Easy. He didn't respond to my voice. His ears pinned forward. His nose flared. And then he barked. A sharp, piercing alert bark that echoed across the terminal. The same bark he made when he detected explosives. People turned to look. A TSA agent's hand moved toward his radio. It's okay, I said, my hands up, diplomatic. He's trained. He just picked up on something. Is he a service dog? The TSA agent asked, already walking over. Military K9, I said, showing my credentials. We just flew in from, I caught myself. Can't discuss deployment locations. From out of state. He sometimes gets alert happy when he's tired. That wasn't true. Max never got alert happy. Max was perfect. Max was trained to perfection, and he only barked when there was a genuine threat. The suitcase kept moving. Max kept barking. I pulled gently on his lead. Come on, buddy. It's nothing. But Max wouldn't move. His entire 85 pounds was focused on that suitcase with an intensity that made my spine tighten. Soldiers learn to trust their instincts. My instincts had kept me alive in places where one wrong move meant death. And my K9's instincts had never failed me. I let him pull me toward the carousel. The suitcase was moving away now, heading toward the far end of the baggage claim area. Max barked again, more urgent this time. Desperate, almost. People were definitely staring now. The TSA agent was definitely suspicious. Sir, if your dog continues to be disruptive, I'll need to ask you to. It's fine, I said, not taking my eyes off Max. He's never done this before. There's something about that suitcase. I moved quickly, jogging toward the carousel, following the black hardshell as it rotated back around. Max pulled harder, dragging me forward with strength I'd never felt from him before. It was like he was terrified, or like he was trying to warn me about something terrible. The suitcase came back around. I reached out and grabbed it. It was warm. Not room temperature warm. It was actually warm, like it had been sitting in the sun or near a heat source. That detail registered in my brain before anything else. That and the weight of it. It was heavier than it should have been. "Sir, you need to open that bag," the TSA agent said, now standing right behind me. "Your dog has flagged it. Protocol requires inspection." I could have refused. I could have explained that Max was just tired, just acting out. I could have walked away and met my wife. Where was she? Why hadn't she shown up? My hands shook as I unzipped the suitcase. The smell hit me first. Copper and something else. Something that made my body go cold despite all my years of combat training. Despite everything I'd seen and done, my hands started to shake. Inside the suitcase was blood. Dark red, dried on the interior panels. And there, caught on a piece of torn fabric. Expensive fabric, the kind Eliza wore, was her wedding ring. The platinum band with the diamond I'd saved for 8 months to buy. The world didn't stop. It accelerated. Everything moved too fast. The TSA agent shouted something into his radio. Another agent appeared. People backed away from me like I had a disease. Max pressed against my leg, whimpering. The first sound I'd heard him make that wasn't a bark. I couldn't breathe. "Sir, step away from the bag," someone was saying. I couldn't move. "Sir, where was my wife? What happened to Eliza? And why was Max the one who brought me home?" My hands were zip-tied behind my back. Not handcuffs, zip ties. Like I was dangerous cargo. Like I was already guilty. The interrogation room at the airport police station was beige. Everything was beige. Walls, floor, metal table, plastic chairs. There was a mirror on one wall, the kind I knew had people behind it, watching. There was a camera in the corner, red light blinking. They were recording everything. Detective Adrian Foster was the one asking questions. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, the kind of face that had seen too many crime scenes. He slid photos across the metal table one at a time. My wife's wedding ring in an evidence bag. A section of torn fabric, midnight blue silk, the dress she wore to my sister's wedding 3 months ago. Her phone, screen completely shattered, battery missing. "Mason Reed," Adrian said, checking his notebook even though he'd already asked me my name 5 times. "Deployed as part of Task Force Black. Classified operations. You just returned 6 hours ago." "Yes," I said. My throat was dry. They'd taken my belt and my watch and my phone. Standard procedure for someone in police custody. "And your wife?" "I told you. I haven't seen her since I deployed." Adrian leaned back in his chair. The legs scraped against the floor, deliberate. A tactic meant to make me uncomfortable. "Text messages show that Eliza Reed texted you yesterday at 4:47 p.m. She said, 'Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby. I have something to tell you.'" My chest went cold. Something to tell me? What was she going to tell me? "I didn't receive that message," I said. "My phone doesn't get international coverage in." I stopped. "Can't discuss deployment locations." "In where?" Adrian asked, leaning forward. "I can't discuss it." Adrian stood up and started pacing. This was deliberate, too. Create space, then close it in. Make the subject feel hunted. I'd been trained to recognize interrogation tactics. I'd been trained to resist them. But this was different. This wasn't an enemy combatant interrogating me for intelligence. This was a cop investigating my wife's disappearance, and every piece of evidence pointed to me. "We found the suitcase under false name. The name listed was M. Reed. Your name, Mason. I didn't rent that suitcase. I've never seen that suitcase before the airport. Your K9 found it," Adrian said. "Military working dogs are trained to alert on specific threats, explosives, narcotics. Why would he alert on a suitcase with your wife's property inside?" That was the question that kept replaying in my mind. Max had never made a mistake. In 5 years of working together, he'd never given a false alert. Not once. But Max also wouldn't alert on blood or jewelry or fabric. Those weren't his triggers, unless someone wanted him to find it. I don't know, I said. Maybe someone put something inside that suitcase that Max detected. Explosives, maybe. Something underneath the blood. Adrian's expression changed. Just slightly. A micro-expression, the kind you miss if you're not trained to watch for it. But I was trained, and I saw it. Why would you say that? He asked carefully. Because it's logical. Max doesn't alert on random items. He alerts on threats. If he alerted on that suitcase, there was a threat inside it. Adrian sat back down and slid another photo across the table. This one was different. It was Eliza. My Eliza. She was pale, standing in what looked like a parking garage. Concrete walls behind her. Poor lighting. She looked scared. This photo was taken by a security camera in the parking garage of Riverside Corporate Plaza, Adrian said. That's where the law firm Brenner and Associates operates. Your wife worked there as an administrative assistant. Do you know when this photo was taken? No. 3 days ago. Tuesday. 6:44 p.m. Do you see the man she's with? There was a man in the photo. Tall, military bearing. His face was turned away from the camera, but something about his profile made my stomach drop. I can't see his face, I said. We're working on enhancing the image. But I want to ask you something, Mason. Your wife, did she ever mention that she was worried about something? Did she mention meeting someone? Did she say anything unusual before you deployed? The deployment had been sudden. Black Ops deployments always were. I'd had 48 hours notice. I'd kissed Eliza goodbye at 5 a.m. while she was still sleeping. She'd asked me not to wake her, said she had a big day at work. I remember thinking it was unusual. Eliza never cared about work. She loved her job, but she wasn't ambitious. She wasn't the type to stress about client meetings. Now I realized I didn't actually know what she did all day. She'd mention clients sometimes. She'd mentioned some of the lawyers were intense. But I'd been preoccupied with mission prep. I hadn't really listened. No, I said. She seemed normal. Happy. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. We found communications between your wife and a man named Nathaniel Voss. Does that name mean anything to you? My hands clenched behind my back. Nathaniel Voss. My former commanding officer. The man I'd served under for 3 years. The man I trusted with my life. He was my CO, I said carefully. He retired from active duty about 18 months ago. I haven't spoken to him since. Adrian pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Nathaniel Voss. Older than I remembered, but unmistakable. Strong jaw, military haircut, cold eyes that always reminded me of a predator's. Nathaniel Voss is listed as the security director for Meridian Holdings, Adrian said, a defense contracting firm. We found 247 text messages between your wife and Mr. Voss over the last 4 months. In those messages, your wife mentions you several times. What did she say? Adrian scrolled through his phone, reading, He's been acting strange. I'm worried about his behavior. And here, I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm scared. And this one, from 10 days ago. He told me I'd regret it if I didn't cooperate. My vision blurred. The beige walls seemed to close in. Mason, we need to ask you directly, Adrian said, his voice dropping lower. Did you ever threaten your wife? No, never. Did you ever hurt her? Never. Do you know where she is right now? I opened my mouth to answer, and that's when the door to the interrogation room opened. A woman in a dark suit walked in, blonde hair, sharp features, already on her phone. She didn't acknowledge me. She just handed Adrian a piece of paper and whispered something in his ear. Adrian's face went white. He looked at me, then back at the paper, then at me again. We just found your wife, he said quietly. She's alive. But Mason, she's been asking for you. And she's saying that you need to be arrested immediately because your life is in danger. The hospital smell hit me before I saw her. Antiseptic and something underneath it. The smell of fierce sweat and medication. They'd cut the zip ties in the cruiser, but my wrists were still raw. Red marks circled both arms like prison tattoos I didn't earn. Detective Adrian walked beside me down the corridor. His jaw was tight. He wasn't looking at me anymore. That had changed in the car. Something he learned in the hospital had shifted his entire attitude toward me. Now he was treating me like I was a victim instead of a suspect. She regained consciousness an hour ago, Adrian said quietly. The doctors said she's heavily sedated but coherent. She keeps asking about you. And Mason? He paused outside room 412. What she's saying doesn't add up. The door opened, and I saw her. Eliza was in the hospital bed, and my entire world stopped. Her left arm was in a cast from wrist to shoulder. Bandages wrapped her ribs. The left side of her face was bruised, deep purple fading to sickly yellow at the edges. Her lips were split. Both eyes were swollen, almost shut. Her hair, usually long and copper brown, had been partially shaved on the left side where stitches held her scalp together. I made a sound I didn't know I was capable of making, something between a sob and a growl. Eliza, I whispered, moving toward her. Her eyes opened, just slits. They found me immediately, like she'd been waiting for me to appear. Mason, she breathed. Her voice was fractured, barely audible. You have to listen. You can't. Don't talk, I said, reaching for her good hand. Save your strength. No. Her grip was weak, but desperate. Listen to me. Nathaniel Voss. Do you remember him? Adrian moved closer to the bed. He was recording this with his phone. My CO, I said. Why would Eliza know? He approached me. Eliza whispered, each word clearly causing her pain. At work. 4 months ago. He said he needed my help with something important. He said you were involved in something illegal. Black market military equipment sales. He said he needed proof. My blood went cold. Eliza, that's not. I didn't believe him at first, she continued, ignoring me. But he showed me documents. Official-looking documents with your name on them. He said if I helped him get more evidence, he'd make sure you didn't go to prison. He said he was trying to protect you. Adrian was writing everything down. His expression had shifted again. Now he looked angry. At Voss, not at me. What did he ask you to do? Adrian asked carefully. He said there would be meetings. People coming to our house. He said he needed me to photograph certain documents. Copy files. He said it was to prove your innocence. Eliza's swollen eyes filled with tears. I was so stupid. I was so scared for you. And I did what he asked. Where is he now? I asked. Eliza tried to shake her head, but winced with pain. He found out I was going to tell you. 3 days ago. He called me. He said if I didn't keep quiet, he'd make it look like you killed me. He said he'd make sure your K-9 was trained to find evidence that would incriminate you. He said he had friends in law enforcement. He said nobody would believe you. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. When did he take you? Adrian asked. Tuesday evening. The parking garage. He called and said he needed to meet me one last time. He said if I met him, he'd give me all the documents, proof that I wasn't involved. He said I could take them to you, and we could go to the authorities together. Her voice broke. I was so relieved. I thought it was finally over. I thought I could tell you everything, and we could fix this. She stopped, unable to continue. Her breathing was shallow and painful. Take your time, Adrian said, but his voice had gone cold. Professional. He already knew what was coming. He drugged my coffee, Eliza whispered. He had a syringe. He told me to drink it, and when I refused, he grabbed my face and forced me to swallow. I remember the taste, bitter and wrong. And then everything went black. My hands clenched into fists. When I woke up, I was in a basement. Dark. Cold. He was asking questions. Where was I going to go? Who was I going to tell? Did I understand that I'd betrayed him? Eliza's breathing became ragged. He said you'd never believe me. He said he'd already put the suitcase on a carousel at the airport. He said my blood was in that suitcase. He said he'd make sure the police found your name connected to everything. How did you escape? Adrian asked. I didn't. Eliza's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He kept me there for 2 days. He kept asking me questions about you, your unit, your missions, your security clearance level. I wouldn't tell him anything. I just kept thinking about Max. I kept thinking that if Max found me, you'd know I wasn't lying. My breath caught. He said the same thing I did. Eliza continued. He said he'd trained Max to alert on certain markers he placed. He said it would look like Max found the evidence, but Max was just doing what he'd been conditioned to do. He had samples of my blood. He had torn pieces of my dress. He had my ring. He had everything he needed. Adrian stepped back. His phone was still recording. His expression was grim. How did you escape? He asked again, more urgently this time. I didn't escape, Eliza said. Yesterday morning, a woman came into the basement. She turned on the lights, and I could finally see where I was. Some kind of warehouse or storage facility. She was angry. She was yelling at Voss. She said he'd gone too far. She said the plan was just supposed to ruin Mason's reputation, not destroy his life. She said she didn't sign up for kidnapping and torture. Do you know who this woman was? Adrian leaned forward. Eliza nodded slowly. She works at his office. I've seen her before. Her name is Paige. Paige Sutton. She was supposed to be helping him frame Mason, but she didn't know he was going to hurt me. Adrian's face went white. He stepped out of the room and started making phone calls immediately. Eliza's hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt. There's something else, she said. Something worse. While I was in the basement, I heard him on the phone. He was talking about other people, other soldiers. He said there were more cases like yours. More women. More evidence he was planting. He said it was bigger than just you, Mason. He said it was about something in the military contracts. Something worth killing for. The room started to spin. Eliza, what was he talking about? I don't know, she said, and fresh tears rolled down her bruised cheeks. But I know he's not going to stop, and I know he's not working alone. Adrian set a file folder on the metal table in front of me. We were back in the police station, but this time I wasn't in custody. This time Adrian believed me. This time we were hunting the same predator. Nathaniel Voss disappeared 12 hours ago, Adrian said, flipping through photographs. Credit card use stopped. Phone pinged last in Newark, New Jersey, but there's no trace of him after that. He has resources, money, military connections. He's gone, but he left a trail. Adrian pulled out 4 surveillance photos. For different women. All different ages, all different ethnicities. All bruised. All hospitalized. These are the other cases, Adrian said quietly. They didn't make national news because the circumstances looked different on the surface. But Eliza's story gave us a pattern to look for. Each of these women was connected to military personnel. Each of their husbands or partners received anonymous tips about security violations. Each of them was investigated and cleared, but their careers were damaged. I stared at the photos. These weren't random attacks. This was systematic. Why? I asked. What's the end game? Adrian pulled out another folder. This one labeled Meridian Holdings. Inside were contracts. Millions of dollars in military equipment procurement. Radar systems, communications technology, ammunition production facilities. Meridian Holdings won those contracts 3 years ago, Adrian explained. Voss was head of security for the company. $42 million annually. But 6 months ago, a Department of Defense auditor named Riley Quinn started looking into their billing practices. She found discrepancies, overcharges, kickbacks being paid to military procurement officers. And Voss wanted to eliminate her as a witness, I said. Not eliminate, Adrian corrected. Discredit. That's the genius of his plan. He targets the people close to military insiders, wives, girlfriends, partners. He frames the military person for abuse or infidelity or betrayal. He plants evidence. He makes the military person look unstable. And when they try to report what's really happening, nobody believes them because their credibility is already destroyed. My hands were clenched on the table. He was building a file on me, I said, creating a psychological profile of an unstable soldier. If I reported the conspiracy, they'd dismiss me as a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Exactly, Adrian said. But here's where it falls apart. Voss miscalculated with Max. He thought he could condition your K9 to be a tool. He trained him to alert on specific chemical markers. But Max didn't just detect what Voss wanted him to detect. Max was protecting you. Max was trying to warn you. I thought about Max sitting in a kennel at the police station, being held as evidence. I hadn't seen him since the airport. Where's Voss getting his money? I asked. 42 million a year from Meridian can't account for the operation he's running. The kidnapping facilities. The hiring of people like Paige Sutton. The false evidence creation. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's the problem. We traced the payments for the storage facility where Eliza was held. We traced the payments for the surveillance operation on you. They don't go to Voss's personal accounts. They go to shell corporations. And those corporations trace back to Meridian Holdings. So someone at Meridian is funding this. Someone high up, Adrian said. Someone with authority to authorize payments and not ask questions. Voss didn't start this alone, Mason. He's working for someone. The door to the interrogation room opened. A woman in a federal agent's suit walked in. She was tall, dark-haired, with sharp eyes that had seen classified operations. Detective Foster, she said, extending her hand. I'm Agent Kendra Mills, Department of Defense Criminal Investigation Command. I need to brief you both on what we've found. Adrian shook her hand. I stayed seated. We've been investigating Meridian Holdings for 14 months, Kendra said, pulling up classified documents on a laptop. Not for the overcharges. Those are real, but they're the distraction. The real problem is that Meridian has been manufacturing military equipment with intentional flaws. Radar systems that malfunction. Communications technology with backdoors built into the encryption. Ammunition with manufacturing defects. Selling faulty equipment to the military, Adrian said slowly. Why? Because the military keeps buying more to replace what's broken, Kendra said. It's a profit model. But here's the real threat. That backdoor in the communications technology? It was designed to give access to foreign intelligence agencies. We believe Meridian has been selling that technology to our enemies. The room was suddenly too small. And Voss discovered this 3 years ago, Kendra said. He was supposed to report it. Instead, he became part of it. We believe he's been managing the security operations to keep anyone from investigating too closely. When Riley Quinn started auditing the contracts, he panicked. The strategy shifted. Instead of just discrediting government auditors, he started eliminating them. The women we saw in those photos? Their partners all had security clearances. Their partners all had access to classified information. If their careers were destroyed, if they were sent to prison on false charges, they couldn't warn anyone about what was happening. He was using the military families as hostages, I said. Psychological hostages. Keep us silent by threatening our loved ones. And it worked, Kendra said, until Eliza refused to stay silent. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Where's Paige Sutton now? In protective custody, Kendra said. She's cooperating. She claims she didn't know the full scope of what she was involved in until the second phase began. She thought she was helping investigate corruption. She didn't know about the kidnappings. Do you believe her? I asked. Kendra hesitated. Partially. But she's guilty of conspiracy regardless. She'll face charges. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. One sentence. Your dog protected you. Now I'm protecting him. Cam. I looked up at Kendra. She was already reading the message over my shoulder. That's not from me, she said. But there was something in her expression that suggested she knew exactly who sent it. What does that mean? Adrian demanded. Kendra stood up. It means there's someone else involved. Someone with access to Voss, to the case files, to your phone number, and to your K9. Someone in this system who we haven't identified yet. The implications hit me like a punch. Someone inside law enforcement was protecting Voss. Someone was helping him run. And they were making sure we knew they had access to everything. They moved us to a safe house. Federal protection. A nondescript suburban home in Maryland with armed agents rotating shifts outside. Adrian stayed with me. He wasn't officially off the case, but everyone knew he wasn't going back to homicide. This had become his obsession now, finding the insider. But obsessions lead to mistakes. Adrian got a tip, an anonymous email with satellite coordinates and a video file. The video showed Voss entering a warehouse facility in Virginia. Live footage. Real time. Someone was tracking him from inside the system and feeding us breadcrumbs. It's a trap, Kendra said over the phone. Her voice was tight. Don't go. He's there, Adrian said, staring at the coordinates on the screen. If we don't move now, he disappears again. That's why it's a trap, Kendra repeated. But Adrian was already loading his service weapon. I grabbed my jacket. I wasn't an agent anymore, but I was still a soldier. I was still trained for this. Mason, no, Kendra said when I showed up at the vehicle. You're a civilian now. You stay here. Eliza's in that hospital because he's still out there, I said. I'm going. Adrian didn't argue. He knew better. The warehouse was 30 miles south, industrial zone, abandoned manufacturing sector. Old tire factory, the GPS said. The kind of place that gets demolished in 5 years and turned into condominiums. The kind of place where people disappear and nobody thinks to look. We came in quiet. No sirens. No announcement. Just 2 men with weapons checking corners like we were back in Kandahar. The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. No guards. No cameras. No security system beeping at the perimeter. Just an open loading dock and darkness beyond. This is wrong, Adrian whispered. The second sign was Max. My K9 was in a reinforced cage in the center of the warehouse floor, directly illuminated by a single overhead light. He was alive, alert, but he was locked down in a way I'd never seen before, sedated, probably, because he wasn't reacting to my presence. That broke something in my chest. It's a setup, Adrian said, weapon raised. We're leaving. But I was already moving toward Max. That's when the lights came on. All of them. The entire warehouse flooded with industrial brightness. And standing at the far end, surrounded by 5 armed personnel, was Paige Sutton. Not kidnapped. Not in protective custody. Armed and waiting. I knew you'd come, she said. Her voice was calm. Professional. The anonymous tip was a test. A way to confirm which law enforcement personnel were actually trustworthy. You sent the tip, Adrian said, keeping his weapon trained on her. You're the insider. I'm the specialist, Paige corrected. Security operations. I was hired 3 years ago specifically to manage the field work for Project Meridian. Nathaniel Voss was just the operations manager. He reports to me. My mind realigned. Everything I thought I understood shifted. Your boyfriend is still out of the country, Paige continued, nodding at me. In a location with no extradition treaty. He'll stay there until this blows over. But your wife, she was a problem. A problem I had to solve. You tortured her, I said. I stabilized the situation, Paige said. Voss was compromised. He developed feelings for your wife. He was losing objectivity. So I took over. I made sure the evidence was compelling, but not lethal. I made sure she'd recover. Because dead wives attract federal investigations. Living wives with trauma and confusion? Those create reasonable doubt. Adrian's finger was tight on the trigger. You're admitting to kidnapping, torture, conspiracy. I'm admitting nothing, Paige said. I'm just having a conversation with 2 people who are about to have a very tragic accident in an abandoned warehouse. 2 people who came after the wrong guy and got caught in crossfire with one of his associates. She wasn't holding a weapon, but the 5 people around her were. The difference between you and me, Paige said, is that I understand the system. You're still trying to work within it. You think law enforcement is going to save you. You think federal investigations are going to bring justice. But justice requires evidence. And all the evidence is contaminated now. All the witnesses are compromised. Adrian moved slightly. Paige's smile widened. Detective Foster, she said, before you do something heroic, You should know that the email about this location? It came from your own police department's secure server. From inside your precinct. From someone who's been working for us since Project Meridian began 3 years ago. The gun in Adrian's hand wavered. There's a corruption network inside every institution, Page continued. Federal agencies, local police, military command structures. It's not complicated. You find people who want better lives. You offer them money. You give them a reason to stay quiet. And suddenly the entire system is protecting you instead of investigating you. Why are you telling us this? I asked. Because you're not going to survive to tell anyone, Page said. And I like to make sure people understand the scale of what they're up against before they die. It's more satisfying that way. She nodded to her security team. They raised their weapons. Adrian fired first. Instinct and training took over. One of Page's guards went down. Adrian was moving, pushing me behind a concrete support column. Bullets tore through the warehouse. The sound was deafening. The chaos was instantaneous. But I wasn't thinking about survival anymore. I was thinking about Max. I broke left, sprinting toward my K9. Page was shouting orders. More gunfire. Adrian was returning fire from his position, keeping them occupied. I hit the ground and crawled under the crossfire, reaching the cage. The lock was biometric. Page's fingerprint. I grabbed her ID badge from where she'd set it on a nearby table and swiped it. The cage clicked open. Max was drowsy but responsive. I grabbed him, pulling him onto my shoulders. Go! Adrian screamed. We ran. Out through a side exit. Into the Virginia darkness. Behind us, the warehouse was erupting into full combat. Sirens in the distance. Federal backup responding to the gunfire. We made it 50 yards before Adrian caught up to me, bleeding from a graze wound on his shoulder. Cars this way, he gasped. We drove in silence. Max came back to consciousness on the back seat, whimpering, confused. I reached back and held his head, reassuring him that we were getting out alive. But I knew the truth that Page had revealed. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning of understanding how deep the corruption really went. We ditched the car at a truck stop outside Raleigh and took separate routes. Adrian to a safe location that Kendra set up. Me and Max to a motel that didn't ask questions. 8 hours of silence. No phones. No contact. Just a wounded dog and a man trying to understand how deep the rabbit hole went. Max's sedation wore off around midnight. He was confused at first, whimpering, checking for injuries. I bathed his paws where they'd been restrained. The skin was raw underneath the fur. Meridian had held him the same way they'd held Eliza. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mason. It was Kendra, but her voice was different. Scared. I'm here. We need you to testify, she said quickly. Closed military tribunal. 3 days. It's your only protection now. Protection from what? From everyone, Kendra said. Paige Sutton disappeared during transfer to federal detention. 2 guards shot. She escaped. We think she's coming after you and Adrian to tie up loose ends before the investigation goes public. The motel room felt smaller. What about Eliza? Marshals are moving her tonight. Different hospital. Different state. She won't know where you are, and you won't know where she is. It's safer that way. But safer meant separated. Safer meant I couldn't protect my wife while I was testifying against people who could destroy me with a single word. There's something else, Kendra continued. We found something in Page's office. Files on everyone. Federal judges. Pentagon officials. Members of Congress. At least 15 names we recognize immediately, and we think there are hundreds more. Project Meridian isn't just about military equipment. It's about leverage. Blackmail. Control. Who's at the top? I asked. That's the problem, Kendra said. The files go up to a certain level and then stop. Someone is protecting the people above Page. Someone with authority to make evidence disappear. Someone inside the federal government. The implications were suffocating. If I testify, I'm going to be a target, I said. Yes, Kendra admitted. But if you don't, everything disappears. Page walks. Voss stays in his safe haven. Meridian keeps selling faulty equipment to our military. More soldiers die. More families get destroyed. I looked at Max, who had finally fallen asleep on the bed beside me. His paws twitched. Nightmare. Even sedated and exhausted, his body was processing trauma. I'll testify, I said. The military tribunal was held at Joint Base Andrews. Underground conference room. No cameras. No media. Just me, 3 senior military judges, Adrian, Kendra, and a court-appointed attorney I'd never met before. I told them everything. The airport, the suitcase, the hospital confession, the warehouse, the revelation that Page was the real architect of Project Meridian. I told them about Eliza's kidnapping, about the surveillance operation on me, about the network of corrupted officials embedded in federal agencies. The judges took notes. Their expressions didn't change. Mr. Reed, Judge Colonel Marcus Hearn asked, "Do you have any evidence beyond your eyewitness testimony?" Page Sutton's admission on video, Adrian said. The warehouse is a federal crime scene. The files she kept in her office. The files are under seal, said Judge Major Olivia Torres. And Page Sutton's admission was made during an illegal apprehension attempt. Any defense attorney will argue the entire case was fabricated to cover up federal negligence. My chest tightened. Furthermore, Judge Colonel James Whitney said, Nathaniel Voss has diplomatic protection in his current location. He can't be extradited. And Meridian Holdings is currently under contract with the Department of Defense for 3 separate military supply programs worth $87 million annually. If we move too aggressively, we risk destabilizing military operations across 3 continents. So you're not going to do anything? I said. Judge Hearn leaned back. We're going to do what's necessary. Quietly. Surgically. We're going to identify which federal officials are compromised. We're going to remove them from power. And we're going to dismantle Project Meridian from the inside. While Page Sutton is still hunting me, I said flatly. Which is why we've made an arrangement, Kendra said. She pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs of a federal facility in West Virginia. Isolated. Secure. Designed to house protected witnesses. Eliza is already there, Kendra said. She's safe. Your K-9 is cleared for relocation. You have 2 options. You disappear into witness protection, assume a new identity, and spend the next decade wondering if you're still being hunted. Or what? I asked. Or we use you as bait, Adrian said. We let Page come after you. But this time, we'll be ready. Judge Hearn shook his head slightly. That's not an approved option. It's the only option that works, Adrian said. If we hide them, the investigation goes nowhere. The corruption stays buried. But if we draw Page out, if we prove she's still active, if we show the system that she's an ongoing threat, then we have justification for a full public investigation. You're asking me to put this man at risk, Judge Torres said. I'm asking you to let him choose, Adrian corrected. 3 judges looked at me. Kendra looked at me. Adrian looked at me. I thought about Eliza in that federal facility, healing from injuries a corrupted system allowed to happen. I thought about other soldiers, other wives, other families, all vulnerable to the same operation that destroyed mine. I'll do it, I said. I'll be the bait. They set me up in a safe house outside Charlottesville, Virginia, a property that supposedly belonged to a retired federal agent. Everyone in law enforcement knew about it. That was the point. The location was intentionally leaked through department channels so Page would find out where I was hiding. Adrian was in the basement with surveillance equipment. Snipers positioned on the property line. 2 federal agents posing as neighbors across the street. Drones overhead. The entire operation was designed to look like I was barely protected, vulnerable enough to attract a predator, but fortified enough to survive the attack. It was bait and trap wrapped into one package. Max stayed with me. Against protocol. Against regulations. But I refused to be separated from him again, and Kendra understood why. Max wasn't just my K-9 anymore. He was the only witness to what happened at that airport, The only proof that my wife's blood was planted there is leverage. We waited. 3 days passed. Nothing. No calls. No threats. No indication that Paige was even looking for me. On the 4th day, I received a package at the front door. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. The truth costs extra. I took it to Adrian immediately. The video file on the drive started with Paige sitting in what looked like a safe house somewhere tropical. Voss was beside her, disheveled, drunk on something. "Hello, Mason," Paige said to the camera. "By now you've figured out that the military isn't going to help you. The FBI won't help you either. Neither will any government agency, because we've already spent 3 years making sure the right people owe us favors." Voss laughed beside her, a hollow, broken sound. "Your wife was supposed to stay quiet," Paige continued. "We gave her a way out. We gave her a choice. But some people just have too much conscience. Some people can't accept how the world actually works." The video cut. New footage. Eliza in the federal facility. A marshal pushed her into a corridor. She looked healed, but scared. My hands clenched into fists. "We have better intelligence than your government does," Paige said as the footage continued. "We know where your wife is. We know she's recovering well. We know she's going to testify against us in about 6 weeks. And we know that once she does, the prosecution's entire case falls apart because we're going to release video evidence showing that you, not Voss, not us, abused her. We're going to release photographs that show you drugging her. We're going to prove that her current injuries came from you, not from us." The video showed Eliza's hospital photos. I recognized them, but the metadata had been altered. The timestamps were changed. The context was destroyed. To anyone looking at the images without the full investigation file, it would look like I was the one who put her in that hospital. "It's a deep fake," Adrian said, watching over my shoulder. "Badly done. Any forensic analysis will prove it. But who's going to analyze it before the press picks it up?" Paige asked through the screen, as if she could hear Adrian's words. "By the time your lawyers can prove the video is fabricated, the story has already spread. Your wife's reputation is destroyed. Her testimony becomes unreliable. And you, Mason? You're convicted by public opinion before trial even starts." The video ended. Adrian was already calling Kendra. "We need to move Eliza. They know where she is." "The facility is secure," Kendra said through the speaker. "No one can get to her." "They don't need to get to her," Adrian said. "They just need to get the footage out." Kendra hung up. 30 seconds later, her phone rang. 30 seconds after that, she was issuing orders to every federal agent in the Eastern Corridor. But I already knew it was too late. The footage appeared online within an hour. Social media, alternative news sites, dark web forums. By the time federal agents started issuing takedown notices, the video had already been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. The comments were vicious. The conspiracy theories were instant. The narrative was already set. Military man abuses wife, covers it up with federal protection, military brotherhood protects him. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Fellow soldiers, childhood friends, people I'd served with in 3 different countries. The subject line was always the same variation. "What the hell did you do?" "It's working exactly how they planned," I said to Adrian. "They're destroying me without ever having to kill me." "We're releasing a statement," Kendra said when she arrived at the safe house. "We're explaining that the video is fabricated. We're providing forensic evidence." "To who?" I asked. "The media won't care about forensics when the narrative is already out. My military file is classified. I can't defend my reputation without revealing things I'm not allowed to reveal." Paige understood the system better than I do. She understood that in this world, narrative beats truth. "We're not giving up," Adrian said. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching Max. My K9 was pacing, agitated by the energy in the room, by the phones ringing constantly, by the sense that something fundamental had shifted. Max had always known when danger was coming. He'd always known before I did. This time, the danger wasn't physical. This time, it was the complete destruction of everything I was. At 2 a.m., I made a decision. I told Adrian I was going for a walk. He didn't stop me. I think he knew what was coming. I walked to the edge of the property with Max beside me. The federal agents in the trees watched, but didn't intervene. The snipers kept their weapons lowered. I was still the bait, still the trap, but I was also a man with nothing left to lose. I pulled out my phone and made a call to a number I'd been given, a number I was told never to use, a number belonging to a journalist named Quinn who had been investigating Meridian Holdings for 2 years, who had been blocked from publishing at every turn, who had been waiting for someone inside to provide proof. "This is Mason Reed," I said. "I'm going to tell you everything. The entire operation. Names, dates, facilities, bank accounts, everything. But when you publish this, you publish all of it. Not the narrative page controls. The whole truth. They'll come after you," Quinn said. "They're already coming after me," I said. "But they can't unpublish the truth. They can't take back what gets out there. This is a risk. My entire life is a risk now," I said. "At least this way, the risk means something." I spent the next 8 hours laying out the complete structure of Project Meridian. Names of corrupted officials, details of faulty equipment sales, the locations of offshore accounts, the identity of Voss's contacts in the Middle East who were receiving the military technology with backdoors. Everything. By 10 a.m., Quinn's story was published across every major news outlet in the country. Within hours, it went international. And everything changed. The federal government moved fast once the truth was out. Faster than I expected. Faster than Page anticipated. Within 12 hours, the Department of Defense froze all of Meridian Holdings contracts. Within 24 hours, the FBI arrested 6 federal procurement officers, 3 Pentagon officials, and a congressman who had been receiving kickbacks for 3 years. Within 48 hours, Interpol issued an international arrest warrant for Nathaniel Voss. But Paige Sutton remained a ghost. "She's moved countries again," Kendra told me over a secure line. "We're tracking her financial movements. She's liquidating accounts. She's burning bridges. She knows the operation is collapsing. She still has the leverage," I said. "She still has people in the system." "Not anymore," Kendra said. "The arrests are causing a cascade. Everyone's running scared. Everyone's turning on everyone else to save themselves. The network is imploding." I wanted to believe her, but I'd learned that belief was dangerous in this world. Adrian arrived at the safe house that evening with news. His face was different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. "Eliza's testifying tomorrow," he said. "Grand jury. Federal prosecutors want her statement on record before Page can retaliate further." "Is she ready?" I asked. "No," Adrian said. "But she's going anyway." I was watching the news when the shooting started. Eliza was walking out of the federal courthouse in Philadelphia. Marshals on either side. Media scattered across the steps. She was wearing a dark suit. Her face was still healing, visible bruises, but she was moving with strength I'd never seen before. Then the first shot came through. It came from a rooftop across the street. Sniper angle. Professional. The first marshal went down. Eliza hit the ground. More shots. Chaos erupted on the courthouse steps. Media scrambling. Federal agents returning fire. But the shooter wasn't trying to kill Eliza. The second shot took out the marshal's radio. The third shot shattered the armor on one agent's vest. The sniper was hurting them, moving them, separating them. I realized what was happening just as Adrian screamed through the radio. "It's a distraction," he yelled. "Multiple teams moving in from the south entrance. They're using the sniper to keep us engaged on the north side." The safe house shook. An explosion on the property line. The federal agents stationed outside were under attack. Not from outside, from inside. Federal badges. Federal weapons. Corrupted agents who'd stayed hidden through the initial purge. "We have to move," Adrian said, bursting through the safe house door. "Now? They're trying to pin us down." Max was already moving, responding to the urgency in Adrian's voice. I grabbed the go bag that had been packed for exactly this scenario and followed. We exited through the basement tunnel system that had been installed decades ago. By the time we reached the end, I could hear gunfire echoing through the safe house above us. Adrian's partner, Agent Colin Hayes, was waiting at the secondary exit with a vehicle. "Eliza?" I asked as we jumped in. "Safe," Colin said. "They got her out of the courthouse through the underground. She's already moving to a secure location." We drove in silence through the Virginia darkness. No destination, no plan, just movement and the knowledge that we weren't done yet. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't. Check your email. Then understand what you've really done." I opened the email attachment. It was surveillance footage from a federal facility. Clear, precise video. It showed armed operatives, my federal protectors, moving through a corridor. It showed them entering a room where a young girl was being held. It showed them transferring her to a vehicle. My blood froze. "That's Ivy," Adrian said, looking over my shoulder. "Voss's daughter. The witness we're protecting." "Not protecting anymore," I said. The message was clear. Paige still had leverage. She still had resources. She still had people. And she had a hostage. "We need to tell Kendra," Colin said. "We can't," Adrian said grimly. "We don't know who in her office is compromised. We don't know who's still connected to Paige." The implication was suffocating. The federal system couldn't be trusted. The people we thought were protecting us were working both sides. The corruption ran so deep that we couldn't even identify where it ended. "Paige wants a meeting," I said, reading another text that arrived. She sent coordinates. "A location in West Virginia. She wants me. Alone." "You're not going," Adrian said immediately. "If I don't, she kills Ivy," I said. "She kills Eliza. She uses every leverage point she has left. If you do go, she kills you," Adrian countered. "It's a trap." "It's always been a trap," I said. "The difference is now I know exactly what she wants." I pulled up another text that Paige had sent. "Your silence. Your agreement to take the fall for everything. You go to prison. You admit to abuse. You admit to framing me. You sign a confession that makes this all go away and everyone you love lives." "She's bluffing," Colin said. "She doesn't have the power to make that stick now. But she has enough power to make sure Ivy dies," I said. "And that's enough." Adrian grabbed my arm. "If you do this, you're finished. Your life is over." My life was over the moment that K9 barked at an airport suitcase. I said, "I'm just choosing to make sure someone else has a future." I looked at Max, my loyal companion, the dog who had risked everything by doing exactly what he was trained to do. The dog who had inadvertently exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. "I'm going," I said. "I'm coming with you," Adrian said. "No," I said. "You take Max. You take him to Eliza. You make sure they stay together. You make sure they're safe." Max sensed something was changing. He pressed against my leg, whimpering. "This isn't goodbye," I told him, my hand on his head. "This is me making sure you get to go home." I got out of the vehicle at a truck stop outside of Wytheville, Virginia. Adrian didn't try to stop me. He just watched me walk away with tears in his eyes. I hitchhiked to the coordinates Paige provided. A cabin in the mountains. Isolated. Perfect. I walked in knowing I would either walk out with a confession signed in my own blood, or I wouldn't walk out at all. The cabin was colder inside than outside. Paige was sitting at a wooden table with Ivy beside her. The girl was terrified but unharmed. She had her father's eyes, that same predatory coldness she'd inherited from him, except hers still held fear. "Mason," Paige said, smiling like we were old friends meeting for coffee. "You came. Where's Voss?" I asked, scanning the room for exit points, for threats, for any angle I'd missed. "Locked away somewhere very safe," Paige said. "Crying. Falling apart. He was always weak. I only kept him around because he was useful. Now he's just a liability." "And the confession?" I asked. Paige slid a document across the table. 20 pages. My name on every page. Admissions of abuse. Confessions of framing her. Statements that would bury me forever. Sign it, and Ivy lives, Paige said. Adrian lives. Your wife lives. Max lives. Everyone you care about survives. You just take a different kind of fall. I looked at Ivy. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her bruised cheeks. Your father already betrayed you, I said to her. You know that, right? You understand that everything he did was to protect himself, not you. Don't talk to her, Paige said coldly. She deserves the truth, I said. Just once, someone should tell her the truth instead of using her as leverage. Paige's hand moved toward a weapon at her side, but I was faster. Not with a gun, I didn't have one. Faster with words. That confession won't stick, I said. Because Adrian's been recording every second of this conversation. Because federal agents are positioned outside this cabin. Because you've already played every card you have, and you're out of options. Paige's smile died. I didn't come here to negotiate, I continued. I came here to make sure Ivy knows that her father's choices were his own. That you manipulated him. That you were the architect of everything that destroyed his life and nearly destroyed mine. And I came here so that when you're prosecuted, when you're convicted, when you spend the rest of your life in federal prison, you'll understand exactly why you failed. I didn't fail, Paige said, but her voice wavered. The network survives. Voss's handlers. Meridian has accounts still active. The corruption doesn't end because you think it ends, I said, because every person in that network is now running. Because their colleagues are testimony. Because the system, imperfect as it is finally working. Because you underestimated something fundamental. What? Paige demanded. You underestimated a dog, I said. You underestimated one military K-9 who did exactly what he was trained to do. You built an entire operation on the assumption that you could control everything and everyone. But Max wasn't yours to control. And that one uncontrollable element destroyed everything you built. Paige pulled her weapon, but she was a half-second too slow. The federal agents burst through the windows and doors simultaneously. Paige was on the ground, disarmed, in custody before she could fire a single shot. Ivy ran to me. I held her while she sobbed. Grief, relief, confusion all mixed together. Your father made terrible choices, I said quietly to her. But you don't have to make them too. You get to decide who you become. You get to choose differently. The trial lasted 4 weeks. I didn't have to appear. My testimony from the tribunal was sealed and protected. But Adrian testified. Kendra testified. Other soldiers testified. Eliza testified. A full courtroom, her voice steady despite everything she'd endured. Paige was convicted on 47 counts. Conspiracy, kidnapping, torture, attempted murder, fraud, corruption. She received 7 consecutive life sentences without parole. She'll die in federal prison. Nathaniel Voss was extradited to the United States after his location was finally discovered. He received 12 life sentences. He maintained his innocence through trial and sentencing, but nobody believed him anymore. Meridian Holdings was dismantled. Its contracts were canceled. Its executives were prosecuted. The faulty military equipment was traced back to conflict zones where American soldiers had been harmed by the malfunctions. And Ivy was placed in witness protection. A new identity. A new life. The marshals helped her enroll in college. She chose to study criminal justice. She wanted to work with law enforcement someday. 6 months after the trial, I got a visitor at the apartment where I'd been relocated. A modest place in Portland. A job doing security consulting for private firms. A life that wasn't spectacular, but was stable. It was Eliza. She looked completely different. Not physically. She'd healed from her injuries. Psychologically. She was walking upright now. No fear in her eyes. No trauma frozen in her expression. Just a woman who'd survived something terrible and was choosing to move forward. Hi, she said at the door. Hi, I said back. I wanted to thank you, she continued, for coming back from everything, for not taking her offer, for choosing to fight. I wanted to thank you. I said, for not staying silent, for having the courage to tell the truth even though it terrified you. We stood there in the doorway for a long moment, not quite ready to touch, not quite ready to pretend that what happened hadn't changed us both fundamentally. We don't have to figure everything out today, Eliza said finally. No, I agreed. But I want to try. I want to try to get back what we had, or find something new, something stronger. I want that too, she said. Behind me, in the apartment, Max was waiting. He'd been in protective custody through the trial, but the marshals had released him to me once everything was finalized. He bounded forward now, tail wagging, greeting Eliza like she was the most important person in the world. Maybe, in a way, she was. Eliza moved in 3 weeks later. Not dramatically, not like we were trying to rewrite history. Just slow, deliberate steps toward rebuilding something we couldn't quite name yet. We didn't talk about the past. We just lived in the present and let the future unfold without forcing it. Max thrived with Eliza in the house. He'd always been protective of her, but now it was different. It was gentle. He understood she was healing the same way he was healing. They'd both been weaponized. They'd both survived. They recognized that in each other. A year passed. Then another call came. Not from law enforcement. From someone I never expected to hear from again. It was Ivy. She'd graduated from college. Top of her class. She was being recruited by the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division. They wanted her to work on corruption cases, specifically targeting internal threats like the ones that had nearly destroyed her family. I wanted you to know, she said over the phone. I wanted to thank you for what you said that day in the cabin. About choosing differently. I did choose differently. And I'm going to spend my career making sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. There's something else, Ivy continued. We found something. In one of Paige's encrypted servers. Information about other operations. Other names. Other conspiracies still active. My stomach tightened. How deep? I asked. Deep enough that it's going to take years to unravel, Ivy said. But we're starting. The system is finally working the way it's supposed to. After I hung up, I sat with that information for a long time. Eliza found me on the apartment balcony, looking out at the Portland skyline. What's wrong? She asked. It's not over, I said. The corruption. It goes deeper than we thought. It's going to keep going. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed how I understood everything. Maybe it's never over, she said. Maybe that's not the point. The point is that we're aware now. The point is that people like Ivy are going to be watching. The point is that you survived long enough to make sure someone else could carry the torch. She was right. Max pressed against my legs, reminding me that I wasn't the only one who'd survived. I wasn't the only one who had to carry the weight of what happened. That night, I made a decision. I called a journalist named Quinn, the same one who'd published the original investigation into Project Meridian. I told him there was a book to be written, not just about what happened to me and Eliza, about the entire network, about how deep corruption runs in institutions people trust, about how one K9 accidentally exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. The book was published 18 months later. It became a bestseller, not because of the action or the betrayal, though those elements were compelling, but because it asked a question that no one had been asking. How many Paige Suttons are still out there? How many corruption networks are still operating while we celebrate the ones we've supposedly dismantled? Eliza was promoted to a management position at a nonprofit focused on supporting witnesses in federal protection programs. She was working with people like herself, survivors of crimes they didn't commit, people broken by systems that failed them, people trying to rebuild. And Max? Max was retired from military service. His K9 record was declassified and made public. He became something of a symbol, the dog who saved a soldier by doing exactly what he was trained to do. He received recognition from the Department of Defense. Documentaries were made about his role in uncovering Project Meridian. But to Eliza and me, he was just Max. He was the creature who'd forced us to face a truth we couldn't ignore. He was the reason we were both still alive. 2 years after everything ended, I received an unexpected invitation. A congressional hearing. Representatives wanted me to testify about institutional corruption and how it operates inside federal agencies. They wanted recommendations on how to prevent future networks like Project Meridian. I almost refused. But then I thought about Ivy, about the other soldiers whose families had been destroyed, about all the people who were still vulnerable to the same tactics. I testified for 7 hours. I described the methodology Paige had used, how she identified people who wanted better lives, how she gave them justification for corruption, how she created compartmentalization so that individual actors never understood the full scope of what they were participating in, how she used leverage, family, blackmail, threats to ensure compliance. At the end, a congressman asked me the question I'd been waiting for. Mr. Reed, do you believe this type of corruption still exists within our federal agencies? I looked directly at the camera. I thought about Ivy starting her career. I thought about the encrypted files that were still being analyzed. I thought about all the people and systems of power who were still making bad choices for good salaries. Yes, I said. I believe it does. And I believe it will continue to exist until we stop treating it as inevitable. Until we stop accepting the narrative that corruption is just how things work. Until we start holding people accountable. Really accountable, not just the scapegoats, for the damage they cause. The hearing ended. The recommendations I made were implemented. Not perfectly, but progress was made. 3 years after that night at the airport when Max barked at a suitcase, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Portland with Eliza and Adrian. Adrian had retired from law enforcement. He was now running a consulting firm that helped federal agencies identify corruption networks before they became operations like Project Meridian. You ever regret it? Adrian asked me. Coming forward? All of this. I looked at Eliza. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. No, I said, because the alternative was silence. And silence would have destroyed us more thoroughly than any conspiracy ever could. Max was sleeping at my feet, old now, gray around his muzzle, but still alert, still protective, still the guardian who'd saved us all by doing exactly what he was trained to do. Here's what I want to know for next time, Adrian said, grinning. How do you want to hurt me? Because I know you're working on another story. I can see it in your face. I laughed. Different kind of story. Not about military corruption. About something more personal. About what happens when someone uses their family as a business asset. About a corporate executive and the secrets his wife discovers. About revenge that's quiet but devastating. I'm listening, Adrian said. Eliza squeezed my hand again. Just make sure it's true. Make sure it's real. Make sure it matters. That's the only kind of story worth telling, I said. If you've made it this far, you know this story was more than entertainment. This was about corruption, about betrayal, about the power of truth. Here's what I need from you. First, hit that like button. Comment your city or country. Tell me where you're watching from. Second, subscribe for more betrayal stories, more military thrillers, more tales of quiet revenge and justice served cold. But here's what matters most. Tell me in the comments, what stories do you want to hear? Are you drawn to military betrayals like this? Corporate corruption? Family secrets? Revenge stories? Twisted psychology? Give me your genre. Tell me your preference. Because I'm creating the next story specifically for what you love. And here's a promise. Every story I create will be like this one. Real, logical, emotionally devastating. No filler. No nonsense. Just raw truth wrapped in narrative that grips you until the final frame. What kind of story is calling to you? Corporate betrayal? Spousal deception? Revenge that changes everything? Tell me in the comments below. The next story starts whenever you're ready. And it'll be even darker than this one.